Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight to Flyleaf Books. We're your local independent bookstore, and we really appreciate your attendance and your book purchases that let us have these events, so thank you. This evening, we have the pleasure of hearing from Jean Nichol, presenting Now What? How North Carolina Can Blaze a Progressive Path Forward. Jean Nichol, former dean of the UNC Law School and president of the College of William and Mary, is the author of The Vices and Poverty in North Carolina, Indecent Assembly, and Lessons from North Carolina, and Now What? Nichol has been a columnist for the Raleigh News and Observer and the Charlotte Observer for over 2 decades. Remember to grab a copy of Now What up at the counter after the talk. We do have more copies as supplies last. If you haven't gotten one yet, I think Jean will be able to sign a bit more after the talk. So turn it over to Jean Nichol, everyone.
It's great to see so many friends. Thanks for coming. I just got out of class, and so it feels right in a way. Welcome to my favorite bookstore. I always say that. But here, it's true. Flyleaf is a great bookstore, and it's in my neighborhood, which makes it doubly great. But I think I am going over to Quail Ridge in a few days, and to Scuppernongs, and McIntyre's, and the Malaprops. So it's possible I will say those are my favorite bookstores too, but it won't actually be true. It's a lot of friendly faces, and so thanks for coming. I've been thinking about this a lot. This thought pops to mind a lot. There's an old Jackson Browne song, and my kids would say it's humiliating to have someone quote a Jackson Browne song. I agree with that. One of my daughters would say it's remarkably bougie, and it is bougie. But this line just keeps coming to my head, has for years now. Across my home has grown the shadow of a cruel and senseless hand, though in some strong hearts the love and truth remains. Both of those things hit me, the shadow of a cruel and senseless hand, but maybe even more importantly, the strong hearts in which love and truth remains. And a lot of strong hearts I recognize right here in this room. I also want to thank a couple of people in this room particularly, even though that's hard, but you'll see why. Patrick Brady is here and Hannah Liddy is here. These are my 2 students who worked a whole lot on this book, and so if anybody deserves special recognition, it would be them. Thanks for I stand before you tonight almost embarrassed to report that I've written yet another book about North Carolina politics. By my count, that's 4 in 8 years. You might begin to think I'm obsessed. I'm more inclined to say that I'm just having a hard time keeping up, no matter how cynical I get. I have decided, though, to start dedicating these efforts to Phil Berger and Paul Newby, with a special little tribute and notation to the UNC Board of Governors, who have done so much to encourage me in my publication. I am pretty sure that I wouldn't have written nearly as much but for these outrageous figures. And I know that North Carolina would be the same but for those outrageous figures. This, I admit in the introduction, is an odd book. It's odd because it's a work about a war on democracy within the United States, but it isn't about Donald Trump, the most radically undemocratic and dangerous political leader in American history. He hovers over it a little bit, like everything else in the United States. But this book is about a distinct, though related, war on constitutional democracy, playing out this very minute and for the last 15 years in North Carolina, the state that I love, the state that you love. Hark the sound, as they say. I'll admit from the outset that Carolina's Republican crusade to end, to literally crush constitutional democracy here, is different. It's different in tone, in character, in aesthetic, in methodology, than the horrors we see daily coming out of D.C. For one thing, it's older. It started here 5 years before Trump came down the golden escalator. And our anti-democratic work is probably less boorish and overtly threatening, less visibly steeped in cruelty and hatred than the national version, though its exclusions always tend to match precisely those of its forebears. Our anti-democratic work is more rooted in power and in the distorting structures of power which it has here created and entrenched, power and tribe and race and religion, than the public embrace of malevolence, which is the working fuel of its national counterpart. North Carolina's sedition work, I think, is both superficially better and operationally worse than its national counterpart. It is more successfully packaged in flag lapel pins and Chamber of Commerce memberships, and certainly in evangelical pieties. It is more strategic and professionalized, if those words can be applied to a project to destroy the American experiment. And it may prove even more difficult to rid ourselves of. It will live here, even if, as we all could hope, Trump falls. Phil Berger and his crew will keep their unconstitutional vice grip on democracy in North Carolina until we take it back from them. That job, that removal effort, is to be left for us, every single one of us. And how we might go about freeing this state from its capture is at bottom what this little book is about. But first, I feel obliged to explain how the theft has occurred. You know the story, or at least most of you do, but we've got to be clear-eyed about what we face and why we face it. Here is how it's worked. First, the new North Carolina Republican Supreme Court says that extreme political gerrymandering is just fine. In fact, it's dandy. Boys will be boys. Chief Justice Paul Newby explains, almost comically, as if we were fools, that Tar Heel's constitutionally guaranteed right to free elections doesn't mean they have to be fair elections. rigged elections are still free. Try explaining that to someone who is not a committed liar. Then the Republican General Assembly again takes up the invitation, so that in 2024, Democrats win the major statewide races, as you'll recall, because you can't gerrymander a statewide race. There's only one district, the whole state. But even though more Tar Heels voted for Democrats than Republicans to represent them in the General Assembly, Republicans end up getting 2/3 or nearly 2/3 of the seats. Cheating works. Permitted cheating really works. And now trying to imitate Texas and Phil Berger begging for a Trump endorsement, they're going at it once again, even as we speak, this very day. We need to prove that we are the worst in the country, the toughest, the most brutal, the most anti-democratic. It's the defining work of our adversaries. But even that's not enough. Republicans repeatedly disappointed in statewide races develop a second plan, unseen in the United States. When Democrats win state positions, like Josh Stein did in 2024 or Roy Cooper before him, Berger and his colleagues sweep away the traditional powers of the newly elected Democrats and deliver them to Republicans, what folks across the country now refer to as the North Carolina plan. You know the drill. We make the auditor the overseer of elections, though no one in North Carolina voted for that, and no state in the nation has the auditor oversee elections. We shuffle the deck until we get executive powers distributed in just the way that Phil Berger wants them, not the way the voters assumed or the way the North Carolina Constitution commands. And Berger won't even tell us what's going to happen until after he sees the election results. It's a nice gig. You can get it. Maybe next time he'll make the agricultural commissioner head of the SBI, or the state librarian head of the militia, as long as they're Republicans. Now I have to add that that power grab, that particular one, would be invalidated in any state that had an actual Supreme Court. It is as unconstitutional as the day is long. But we don't have an actual state Supreme Court. Our Republican majority, or 4 of them, are not judges. They are corrupt, politically corrupted knaves, doing the work of the party, not the work of the law. And they aren't even embarrassed about it. And though this is more than any of you want to know, but there's no federal court to fix that outrage. State separation of powers issues are, in our system of government, reserved to state tribunals. We assume that state courts are not crooked, but ours is. So we have a Republican legislature that exercises illegitimate and disproportionate powers because it has captured the election process for its members. Then the General Assembly debilitates the executive branch through sore loser laws that overturn statewide elections when lawmakers don't like the results. And the state Supreme Court abets the transgressions, effectively eliminating constitutional government in North Carolina. This is not exaggeration or fantasy. It is the political world that presently exists in the Tar Heel state. No person who believes in democracy should support or compromise with this defining portrayal. When someone's out to demolish your foundational human rights, no one should ever be heard saying, "Hey, buddy, can I meet you halfway in that mission?" So I try to outline in this book a small agenda to try and combat this sedition, this tyranny. I argue in various chapters for a right to equal political participation, outlawing political gerrymandering and removing redistricting powers from the legislature. I look for ways to combat a state Supreme Court that violates its sworn oath, not only to enforce the Constitution, but to administer justice, quote, without favoritism to anyone. We are a much divided state, and I have no doubt that many people here likely support the treacheries of the North Carolina Supreme Court. But no one, literally no one in North Carolina, thinks that they administer justice, quote, without favoritism to anyone. I also advocate rights to equal dignity and full membership, trying to assure reproductive freedoms and personal privacy. I argue more extensively for rights of economic justice, even here in the South, suggesting non-controversially, quote, that the central purpose of the North Carolina Republican Party is to make rich people richer and increase economic inequality in what is already the most unequal nation in the world. And reminding all of a fundamental Tar Heel right to equal and effective public education for all children, everyone. I try to offer ways to demand Leandro's enforcement and to declare private and religious school vouchers unconstitutional. And I would hope to expand rights and the duties of North Carolina government to address climate change as well. My own thought is that we can be optimistic on these fronts, not only because of our success in statewide races, but because as we get better at truth-telling, Republican political agendas built on pretext or lies will increasingly falter. And not only can North Carolina draw powerfully on histories of progress and the strength of our movement politics, and frequently our democratic politics, but maybe most importantly, with the mocking of the electorate by Phil Berger's sore loser laws and Paul Newby's overt, open, plain as day attempt to steal the Allison Riggs race. North Carolina Republicans have now come out of the closet as unembarrassed enemies to constitutionalism. And I am confident that North Carolinians are not going to stand for it. As Ulysses Grant put it in 1861, there are but two political parties now, patriots and traitors. There is no such thing for us as giving up, as surrender. There's no such thing as dividing ourselves, letting ourselves be put asunder. All hands must be on deck, every one of them, from the start line to the finish. And that must happen now in this next election cycle before it is too late. Let me stop there and we can open it up for questions or discussion. I know a lot of you, and I know you like to talk. I'm perfectly happy with long and cantankerous questions. So why don't we start that? Well,
I read your comment, your column the other day in the N&O, and while I was reading it, I could hear you standing at a podium delivering that column.
I'm sorry about that.
I am not.
Thanks. Yeah.
So what would you say to our Republican foes when they criticize us for imitating their tactics in California and New York?
Yeah, it's a good question, a hard question. I admit, I'm not one who would criticize what they're doing in California. I'm not one who would say they get it wrong. I do think it makes more sense for us to try and enact an independent commission. There are a couple reasons for that. One is we've come close to that in the past. There have been proposals put forward in earlier times, which Republicans supported. They obviously have given up on that now and find it to be an anathema. But my theory, which may be wrong, is that all it will take is for us to regain a House or more, and that will change the incentives, in my own judgment, about the way Republicans in North Carolina look at electoral cheating. They may think that the tide might turn and therefore support electoral reform. I'm not certain that that's true. It's a judgment call, but we're a long way in North Carolina from being able to do what California is doing, practically speaking. So I think it's a close call. I wouldn't, as I said, I wouldn't criticize Governor Newsom, whether he's one of my favorites or not. And I do think we need to fight fire with fire. I'm just not sure that that's a fire that is going to do anything but burn us looking back at it. Yeah.
What about getting citizen initiatives?
Yeah, citizens initiatives would be terrific. It's crucial. You know what's happening in North Carolina. Ironically, not having citizen initiative, we get all this talk out of the legislature and the state court about them being the golden representatives of the people of North Carolina. You know, the state Supreme Court started describing them as the great and unmatched branch representing the sacrosanct will of the people. If you could imagine such a thing. And yet, despite their glorious talk about the sacrosanct will of the people, Democrats have tried to get an abortion rights provision. Rachel Hunt did that. If you believe in the will of the people, then let's let the people vote as they have in many states across the country. But Republicans aren't going to allow that. They don't want to come within 5,000 miles of the will of the people of North Carolina on questions of reproductive freedom. And we can't do what we ought to be able to do, what can be done in those states, because we don't have the citizen-driven initiative. So that would be a huge benefit to North Carolinians. And I lived in Colorado before I came here, and I can tell you that citizen initiatives can be a little risky. We got some great ones in Colorado and some heinous ones. But it's a powerful way to control the fate of the legislature. And God knows we need that in North Carolina more than any single thing.
Well, it requires a constitutional amendment.
Yeah, no, it does.
Have we had constitutional amendments in North Carolina? I've only been here 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of them, but they always are put up notions by the Republicans to try and drive the vote. We just had one saying that non-citizens can't vote in North Carolina. I'm not sure that was a contested notion. But so they put a lot of things on the ballot. They just won't put things on the ballot which are actually important to the people of North Carolina, because they know that they're not representative of the people of North Carolina on these foundational issues. James.
So, how do you wait?
James is one of my mentors.
Well, well, thank you.
No, James. Let me tell you a little story before he talks about it. So, I've done a lot of poverty work in the last 20 years in North Carolina. One thing I hadn't paid attention to before I was instructed by James Williams was the great travesty of fines and fees in the criminal justice process. We eventually did do a lot of work on that, and it had some impact locally and on the statewide basis. But one day, James comes to my office and says, "Okay, Mr. Poverty, you're talking about all these ways in which there's hardship all over the state. Do you know in your own county, here in Orange County, we have this outrage of making people pay fines and fees and then putting them in jail when they can't pay them. What are you going to do about that, big talker?"
I didn't say it quite like that.
Yeah, that was the way I heard it. But it did both me and the Poverty Center some good. Anyway,
Well,
sorry, James.
I'm glad you had an open ear.
Yeah.
Heart. But my question, and I don't know that there's good. How do you awaken the sleeping giant? I mean, where's the passion for democracy? You would think people see these things happening. Where's the uprising? I mean, you see it happen in other countries from time to time, but we are somewhat placid about this thing called democracy.
I know, and we, even as Democrats, make ourselves more placid by saying that all anybody cares about is the price of eggs or this or that, and so don't talk about democracy. I think two things about that. One is, even when we talk about democracy, we don't talk about it as the threat exists. I mean, who is it in North Carolina or elsewhere that's out there describing the literal crushing of democracy in North Carolina? Not many. So we don't deliver the exigency, which is back of that challenge. And it's our obligation to do that. I mean, I talk a lot about this in the book. We don't deliver that exigency on all kinds of fronts. Think about the economic agenda of the Republicans in the last 15 years. It's stunning what it is. They cut benefits of all low-income people. They massively cut income taxes for the wealthy of us and for out-of-state corporations frequently. And then they don't talk about this. They raise dramatically the income taxes, the sales taxes, of the bottom 40 or 50%. So one of the things that's happened in the last 15 years is we have developed an upside-down economic system where the wealthiest people pay the smallest percentage of their income. Can you imagine such an outrage? And the highest percentage of income is paid by the bottom 20%, 30%, 40%. I don't ever hear them talking about that in the slightest. But what pisses me off about Democrats is that they don't seem to raise objection to it. You kind of give people a cakewalk, it seems to me, if you're accepting the notion that it's okay to take money away from low-income Tar Heels, which is what we do every year. They do it intentionally. They've even said we're expanding sales taxes and applying them to various repair services and the like because we think low-income people ought to pay more taxes. Now, who could look at the American system, at the North Carolina economy and say, you know, the biggest problem in North Carolina is that people at the bottom have too much and those at the top don't have enough. But that's what Republicans get away with, and it's our fault that they get away with that. So candor, or more than candor, a little heat, not just light, is deserved.
More
Second,
Nichols, right?
well, Secondly, here's where I disagree a little bit on the sleepiness. I was shocked, as everybody in this room was, about the Allison Riggs race. I never thought, frankly, I mean, no one, let's say this, no one has a lower opinion of the North Carolina Supreme Court in the United States than I do. No one. But even I did not think they would overtly, in plain sight, work to steal an election. I just thought it was too far outside the norms of the legal profession. It was too obvious. It was too patent. Bad as they were, I didn't think anyone would do what they did. But they did it. They eventually got reversed by a federal judge, from the law school, by the way, who said this simply. Well, here's what this case presents, the Jefferson Griffin case. Can you change the rules after the election and then apply those changes to just some people on the ballot? And even Richard Meyer said that question sort of answers itself. It's impossible to do. It's stunning that anyone did it. Now, I think the North Carolina Supreme Court came out of the closet in that instance. And here's where I think something did occur, James. Like you, like other people in this room, I went to demonstrations, spoke to demonstrations all over North Carolina, on every street corner, in every county courthouse, in the east, in the west, in metropolitan areas, and people were livid about this direct attempt to steal an election. And I think that included lots of normal people. Okay? People not heavily involved in politics. People who, I think this, wouldn't normally believe that the people in the Republican caucus of the General Assembly are trying to destroy democracy in North Carolina. Nobody wants to believe that. Nobody wants to think that. You don't want to think that poorly of the people who are representing you from your communities. But people all over North Carolina got it rubbed in their noses. And by the thousands, they said, look, I may be willing to give you the benefit of the doubt, but I'm not going to let you steal an election and rub my face in it. God damn it, I'm not going to do that. And I think that heat is still there. I think they overplayed their hand by thinking, look, we're used to cheating. We're used to lying. We make up theories for these laws, and everybody knows that it's not the truth. So how much different is it to just steal an election? Well, it's pretty goddamn different is what it is. Or my point, regular folks saw it as different. You know what other regular folks saw that as different was veterans. The number of veterans that I ran into in these angry demonstrations who thought, who in the hell thinks that you repay my service to the country by taking away my right to vote? I never thought anybody would do that. So it's my hope, and I think there's some justification for it, to think that these people have, by my measurement, they'd overplayed their hand 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But I think now by normal folk, I don't include myself in that category, I think now for normal folk, they have said, Jesus, I don't want to believe this, but these people are trying to do in everything that we've fought for in this state for centuries. They're on the wrong side of Normandy on this question. And we're going to have to take this place back from them. I hope that's right, James. I'm not certain. You know me. I've been wrong on predictions before. But I do know this. I do know it's our charge to fight. And to fight now with everything that we've got. I see a lot of Carolina people here. Let me just mention an old friend and mentor of mine, Dan Pollitt. Now, a lot of y'all knew Dan Pollitt. You loved him. I maybe loved him even more. He was my great hero. One time, oh God, it must be 20 years ago now, I was very disappointed in a presidential election. Big shock, all right? And I had accepted an invitation to go speak to the annual ACLU meeting, which was to be held 2 days after the election. I had accepted that invitation 9 months earlier. And so I had to go down there and speak to him. Dan asked, we were close, Dan asked to ride with me. He said, let's go down together. I said, Dan, that'd be great. I'd love to talk to you. But I don't know what to say to these folk. I'm so stunned that this election could have gone out the way it does that I just don't know what to do. I don't know what our response should be. And Dan kind of looked at me. He was in the front seat of my car, caught me up in his kind way, and he said, what do you mean you don't know what to do? We gird up our loins and we get back out there and fight. In fact, tomorrow, Nichol, I'm going to find some demonstration somewhere in North Carolina. You and I are going to go out there just to keep in practice. I've always taken, ever since, that instruction from Dan Pollitt. So I don't know that we'll win, but I know that we are charged to fight, and to fight far more profoundly than we even have. I mean, I'm a sort of ridiculous fan of Fannie Lou Hamer. A lot of people here probably are as well. I just think if Mrs. Hamer was here, she'd say, you know, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I've had the living shit beat out of me. I've had my house shot up. I've had my house burned. I've had my church burned. And if I fall, I'm falling 5 feet 2 inches forward for freedom and justice. Well, okay. We've got a lot of work to do. It's hard work, but it's not as hard as Fannie Lou Hamer had to do. It's not the bullet that Dr. King took. It's not charging the beaches at Normandy, though it's the same struggle, literally the same struggle. Do we believe in the American experiment and commitment to democracy or not? I am amazed that we have Republicans in this state who've grown up pledging allegiance, grown up reading about the American experiment, and they are thrilled to try and do it in a fit of power and greed. I don't know. I wonder what do some of these people tell their kids they do? What do you do for a living when you're down there? I used to have this. I heard there was this sort of department in the John Locke Foundation, which was meant to oversee my comings and goings. And I always thought, I don't know if it's true, but it seemed like it to me, given the FOIA requests, which were constantly forthcoming. But I remember thinking, what do you tell your kids you do? I tell my kids, I spend all of my time and all of my energy trying to take the meager resources that poor people have away from them and give them to the richest people in North Carolina. I said, man, I wouldn't want to say that to my kids, I'll tell you. And do you say that to your preacher when you go to church as well? So we have this advantage, that is the core issues which are before us, economically and politically, are all American issues. They are the ones on which this nation is founded. And we happen to live in a state which is happy to try and take them away. I wouldn't have thought that possible. But who can disagree with it now. You've had it stuck right in your face. So if we ain't going to fight now, when are we going to fight? Ted, speaking of fighting, this is the great Ted Shaw, so my colleague.
Thank you, Gene. I was up in Washington this past week. Did what I said I wasn't doing anymore, but I did it anyway, one more time.
I'm not surprised at that. So.
Yeah, I was up in the Supreme Court for the Louisiana voting rights argument. And it's pretty clear, I think, what's going to happen.
Of course it is.
In 2013, we lost Section 5, and we're about to lose Section 2. And basically, that will mean that the Voting Rights Act, almost in its entirety, will have been repealed.
Right.
And that will once again change the face of the South even further.
That's right.
And I'm wondering if you'll talk about the significance and what is coming. I mean, I agree. We got to fight. You say all the time, if you fight, you may lose, you may win, but if you don't fight, you can't win.
Yeah.
But this is a moment in so many ways. But the repeal, whether openly or surreptitiously, of the Voting Rights Act and what's left of it is going to have significant impact. Can you talk about that?
Of course. And to say it's going to have a significant impact is, if anything, an understatement.
Yeah.
There's no doubt what they're going to do with Section 2, like they did with Section 5. And for those who study constitutional theory and history, that's the thing that John Roberts has wanted to do since he was a pup.
Absolutely.
It's his largest single agenda point. I'm going to abolish, I exist to abolish affirmative action and to declare unconstitutional the Voting Rights Act. I don't know what was wrong with that guy's upbringing, what would have made that make you think this is the most important aspect of life for a young lawyer, but he's been on the record for this a long time. We've all known it was coming. And it means, as Ted suggested, that we're going to have an even bigger deficit to overcome, because this will take away an array of seats, particularly in the South, and it's going to do it in a way that's illegal, that's unconstitutional. But we're kind of used to this in North Carolina, aren't we? I always say to people, we have to beat the Republicans and take over the General Assembly. It's going to be the only way that we can save North Carolina. But we know that you can't do that with a 51-49 vote, because the cheating is so dramatically entrenched that we've got to do it by large margins. And this voting rights decision will mean we have to do it by even larger margins. Now, I see some of the best constitutional lawyers in the United States in this room. Some of y'all know that. I really know it. And all I'm going to say to you, great constitutional lawyers, is, as you know, I completely gave up on the United States Supreme Court long before any of you guys did. I was certain what the agenda of the United States Supreme Court has been on questions of equality, and they stand as an impediment, literally as an impediment, to the American democracy. So, if I was talking on the stump, I would have been saying, when we engage in this powerful effort to save democracy in North Carolina, we have to know some things going into that. One is that the United States Supreme Court, the federal courts, are not going to save us. They are not going to save us. There are some good, talented, courageous federal judges. They are spread around some places, and you see them taking steps to try and thwart some aspects of the Trump administration. But they all answer to the same boss. They all are appealed to the United States Supreme Court, And now they don't even issue opinions out of the court. They just say that Trump gets to do whatever Trump wants to do. These federal courts are not going to save us. Is the North Carolina Supreme Court going to save us? What kind of question is that? They are heady partners in the effort to do in democracy in North Carolina. They are greedy and thrilled participants in the notion of destroying democracy here. So I am maybe more cynical than some of my older, well, not older, nobody's older than me, some of my longtime colleagues about what the federal courts will do and what the state courts will do. But I can't imagine anyone thinks the Roberts Court is going to step in to protect voting rights in the United States. I know you don't think that. That's why you're asking the question. So this is all Trump got really mad at Bruce Springsteen. The older I get, I kind of change my constitutional sources and inspiration. For a long time, my favorite constitutional lawyer in the United States was Molly Ivins, the great journalist. Now it's, Molly died, sadly. Now it's Bruce Springsteen. And Springsteen said, when he was over there in Europe, and opened his mind a little bit, that when all of the guardrails are off, which they are literally off. When all the guardrails are gone, all we have is each other. And that's where we are. I wish that wasn't so. I wish that we could depend on the legal system, on the legal profession, but we can't. In North Carolina, you can't even get the Bar Association to raise a whimper about a thief who is the Chief Justice of North Carolina. They don't want to make him mad, or they don't want to this is not a time for not making anybody mad. You don't carry out a fight for your very life and existence and way of governing and theory as a people and just spend all your time worrying somebody may get annoyed with you. We need annoyance. We need the thunder, as Frederick Douglass would say. Light is nice, but we need the thunder. And only by winning the General Assembly by large margins can we save democracy. We also need to, you all know this, we need to retake the North Carolina Supreme Court. So there won't be any more important election next year than Anita Earl's race. But then we have kind of the election, the mother lode in 28. We have 3 of these characters up for re-election. I can't believe they could possibly be re-elected myself. I don't see how you could have Jefferson Griffin's vote around your neck in which you tried to disenfranchise half of North Carolina and still get reelected. So I'm hopeful none of them have a chance of getting reelected, that they became so political that they've done themselves in. But I tell you what, those 3 are up in 2028. We got to win at least 2 of them or we don't have a chance. You cannot have a fight for democracy if you've got a bunch of crooks on the Supreme Court. Now, people don't like it when I say they're crooks, but this is what I mean. They are politically crooked. That is, they answer to politics, not to law. People get annoyed when I say we got a crooked Supreme Court. I say, well, we have a politically corrupted Supreme Court. And then they say, oh, well, that's okay. I see what you mean. So I'm perfectly willing to say that corruption includes political corruption, but how anyone could think we don't have a politically corrupted North Carolina Supreme Court, I don't understand. I've never seen an opinion like the Jefferson Griffin opinion, which didn't even make an effort to do law. It only sort of said, well, we're going to vote the way we vote. We're used to lying. We're Republicans, and we're trying to do in democracy. So let's just cast our vote quickly. Behringer said, let's don't even have hearings. Let's just speed everything up and give him everything he wants. If I've ever seen an opinion that should have been an impeachable offense, that was it. Yes, ma'am.
Speaking of language, I'm curious what you think about the difference between authoritarianism and fascism, and especially with Trump coming out and saying that he's going after Antifa, which stands for anti-fascist. How do we navigate this war of words so that we can get a clear message?
Well, I think we've got a clear message. That is, we have a president of the United States that is violating every restriction of the United States Constitution every day, and that it's picking up speed. The president of the United States pays no attention whatsoever to legal constraint. In fact, I think it gets him worked up. Just the thought, if I could violate the Constitution more next week, think of how impressive that's going to be. So there is no doubt, no matter whether you call it fascism, whether you call it tyranny, whether you call it authoritarianism, we have a president. We're not approaching a constitutional crisis in the United States. We are right smack in the middle of one. And the constitutional crisis is that we have a president of the United States who doesn't follow the Constitution. And when the United States Supreme Court takes up any of his rulings, he wouldn't obey them if they acted, but he didn't have to worry about that. We've got 4 justices on the United States Supreme Court who are thrilled with any agenda of hate, 4 of them. Then we've got Justice Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett who've decided this. Well, I'm really worried about saving the institution of the United States Supreme Court. So how am I going to save it? I won't ever use it. I'll never deploy it. I'll give Donald Trump every single thing that he wants. Well, when you put those two together, the 4 right-wing hate mongers and the 2 who say, the way I'm going to keep my job, it's cool being Chief Justice. The way I'm going to keep it is I'm never going to challenge Donald Trump, no matter how outrageous an activity he undertakes. And I admit, you would say, if you were Justice Roberts, I see where he gets the idea that he can do any damn thing he wants. I told him that in the immunity case. I've been as clear as a bell on that. But when you've got 6 justices who are committed to not doing their job, not following their oaths of office, then you're in trouble as a legal matter. And anybody who's looking to the United States Supreme Court to save us is on a fool's errand. I hate to, I don't know. I used to hate to say that. It's just so blatantly true now that I know some of us who teach constitutional law struggle with what in the hell are you supposed to do now? You can say, as Justice Jackson said, there's only 2 rules. One is that there's no rule, and the other is that Trump wins. That's the American legal system right now. Yeah. Hi.
So I agree with everything you've said tonight. It discourages me, but I'm waiting to have you tell us what positive things could be done to change the situation. The only thing I've heard you say is, well, in North Carolina, we need to change the makeup of the General Assembly, and we need to change the Supreme Court. Couldn't agree more. But how, and you say we need to fight. What does it mean to fight, and how do we do it, and what does this mean for the next?
Okay, now first, let me defend myself modestly on that front, and I know people get annoyed with me for saying what we've got to do is take over the General Assembly and change the Supreme Court, but God damn it, that's what we've got to do.
Yeah,
And there's no doubt that we're not going to get any relief until we do that. Now, you're asking a more important and tougher question of how do you accommodate that? Now, how do you manage it? Now that's what this little book is about, somewhat. I think that, as I said, we need to have a political rights agenda, which is a huge part of our agenda of reform. We've got to run decidedly on the notion that we're going to defeat gerrymandering in North Carolina, and that North Carolina Democrats are not going to agree to gerrymander when they get in. But I think that we need a powerful economic message, which we haven't had. And this is how I would describe that. I think we need to be clear everywhere. Every politician does. I go speak sometimes to the members of the Democratic caucus. I don't know why. I mean, I don't know why they ask me, but they're kind to ask me, and some of them are my heroes. And I would say that they don't as frequently recognize the peril that we are under as people who are out marching do. So I'm hopeful that they will be instructed that way. But an economic message ought to be something like this, okay? I looked at the record of the Republican North Carolina General Assembly, looked at it since 2010. It has delivered an upside down economic approach, which means that the poorest people pay the highest level of taxes, the richest people pay the lowest percentage of taxes, and that's literally unacceptable and unfathomable. I would suggest, I suggest in this book, five other changes I would make, and that would be a start. You guys may have better ones, but first of all, I argue that we have to return progressivity to the tax code in North Carolina. We can't let them get away, nor can we legislate ourselves with the idea of favoring the richest people in the state. Secondly, we need to re-adopt an earned income tax credit. We're the only state in the country that has done away with its earned income tax credit, and we did that so that we could raise the taxes of working families that make about $35,000, $40,000 a year. We want to make them pay more. So unlike anybody else, we abolished our earned income tax credit. 900,000 North Carolina families would benefit from an earned income tax credit, which ought to be refundable as well. Next, there's been a proposal introduced in the North Carolina General Assembly to have a child tax credit. We know a lot about the child tax credit now. We introduced a strong version of it during COVID. It reduced child poverty in North Carolina by 42%, and then we let it die. There's a proposal before the North Carolina General Assembly to have a earned income tax credit, which would be 25% of the federal tax credit, and a child tax credit that would give $1,900 per kid in North Carolina. Next, I would raise the minimum wage. We are one of like 14 states that hasn't raised the minimum wage. Most of the country has a minimum wage which is double hours or more. I would advocate a constitutional amendment which required the North Carolina General Assembly each year to adopt a minimum wage which was at least the equivalent of the national average minimum wage. We've decided this as a people. The way we want to compete economically is to make sure that North Carolina workers are treated worse than anybody in the country. That's the way that we think we can compete in the South and across the rest of the country. We have to reject that. So I would try to change the structure of our government to require a minimum wage, which is at least what everybody else does. So we're not trying to subsidize wealthy people on the back of low-income workers in North Carolina. You know, we have third or fourth highest rate of poverty-level jobs in North Carolina, meaning even if you work full-time, 40 hours, you don't make enough money to lift your family out of poverty. That's a great humiliation to us as a state. Lastly, I would say that we have to assure, this is complicated on how you word it, but we've got to assure that health care is a right in North Carolina. The way I would put it is we won't allow ourselves to take a step backwards on health care, which you know is threatened at this moment because of the goal of some Republicans to end Medicaid expansion and the direct actions of the Speaker of the House and the President of the United States to crush Medicaid. I don't care what the formula is, but we have to continue making progress to assure that all people in North Carolina have health care. No steps back, only steps forward. I would do those 5 things as a start to saying to the people of North Carolina, look, average working folks in North Carolina have been getting screwed for decades. We're going to be the party for average working folk, for low-income folk. And we're going to make sure that they get a fair shake, and we're going to try these half a dozen things. And if we get those, and we still got work to do, which we will, we're going to try half a dozen more. But I don't want anyone in North Carolina to be confused about who we think our constituency is. Our constituency is low and middle income folk who are getting screwed regularly by the North Carolina General Assembly. Now, Sonny, you guys know about this. I think we ought to have a huge agenda also on Leandro, on public education. You know, I had the unfortunate situation, thinking about this book, of studying Leandro and studying vouchers, stuff that you guys know all about. It is astonishing what has happened in Leandro. 25 years, 30 years, we're in worse shape than we were when the case was handed down. It's a flat, look at the language of the North Carolina Constitution. It is a flat duty to deliver a strong and effective system of public education with equal opportunity for everyone. That's written into the text of the Constitution. It's the duty of the state to carry it out. We have never done it. And the General Assembly has refused to comply with appropriate judicial decrees, and they've done something else instead, and you all know this. Rather than funding a public system of equality for all students, they said we want to have a voucher system where we give tons of literally unaccountable money to private, frequently religious, frequently racially discriminatory voucher schools. And we will give them any amount of money that they want. Well, when you think about it for a while and you study it, you realize, actually, our voucher system is simply a declaration that we reject the constitutional requirement of Leandro. We don't believe in it. We don't like it. I don't like the idea of a public school system in which people have an equal shot. I want private, religious, discriminatory voucher schools where somebody's got to pay to support an unaccountable school system which calls him or her an abomination. Well, we ought to say that the right to a sound basic education precludes a voucher-based system. We ought to say directly in our Constitution that private voucherized schools are unconstitutional. They should not be allowed. And we're going to build a public school system, and we're not going to allow the answer that the Republicans have. They say, I don't care about having a good public school system. What I care about is letting parents decide. We've got a constitutional demand to have a public, equal school system. Hannah could tell you that chapter and verse. We don't have any constitutional demand to say I want to give unaccountable dollars to people who want to discriminate through private vouchers. Do your job first. And in the meantime, I think we ought to say what you're doing with vouchers is unconstitutional. We're going to prohibit it. Now, I've got a couple more things, but the long and short of it is I think that we ought to have an agenda which lets average North Carolinians know that Democrats are on their side. There shouldn't be any confusion about that. And I've watched North Carolina Democratic politics long enough to say I think there is some basis for confusion on that. We have, North Carolina's had a long history, I know through documenting it, of ignoring the plight of poor people in North Carolina. We've discovered since 2010 that there's one thing worse than ignoring the plight of poor people in North Carolina, and that's targeting poor people in North Carolina and trying to make them miserable and destroy their children's opportunities. So it can be worse than what we've done traditionally as Democrats, but I don't think we have shown our best side in representing those at the bottom, and that's what we ought to be doing. Yeah, so.
That is not our time, so I think we either call it there, or if you want to do one more question.
Okay, one more question. Yeah.
To your point, it's up to us to make the difference. On Saturday at New Kings, Senator Flyer encouraged the crowd to use their pocketbooks to insert influence. What do you see as the stumbling blocks to mobilizing people essentially to vote daily with their pocketbooks, as Senator Meyer did, and you mentioned Amazon?
Well, I think that's terrific. I think we saw it work a little bit with the Jimmy Kimmel outrage. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert at it, but I'm all for it. I'm all for using everything at our disposal. Here's my theory about what we ought to do. We're in a fight for our very lives, a fight for our children's future, a fight which is meant to decide. One of the chapters I write is about this. You know, here's one way of looking at this. We've had a long history which has embarked upon a question of whether we believe in the premise of the Declaration of Independence, whether we believe in the Gettysburg Address, government of the people, by the people, for the people. North Carolina's long history has indicated that when we start making progress in making the promises of the Declaration of Independence real, then forces arise to limit the right to vote, to limit the expansion of democracy, to destroy pluralistic democracy, and that's where we are right now. So that's the challenge that we have. Do we think that when Lincoln said this country is meant to be for a government of the people, by the people, or for the people, are we on Lincoln's side in this long fight, Or like Phil Berger, like Paul Newby, are we on the other side? Because that's what's entailed. Do we believe in the American promise or do we reject it? I wouldn't have thought that's what we'd come to. But I tell you what, if you don't think that's what we've come to, you're not paying attention. So that means it's for everybody. I can't think of what could be a more important battle. I can't guarantee that we'll win. I've been involved in a lot of struggles. I've probably lost more than I've won. But we have no excuse, no explanation for not making the hardest fight that we can make. So that's what I believe in. I know it's what a lot of folks in this room believe in, and we've got our work cut out for us. All right, I'm told to stop. Thank you very much.